In today's world, it feels that now more than ever, we are more polarized than ever. Social media, such as TikTok, Instagram, X, as well as the mainstream media, allow us to regularly tune in to the things that we agree with. The current system of politics within the West, and especially the United States, is where a side on an issue takes the other side's view or solution to it and purposely misrepresents it and twists it in order to make it seem ridiculous so that it can appease its own side. And in my opinion, this is a very destructive and harmful way of handling political issues because it really halts any form of compromise or coming to a bipartisan solution on an issue. And ultimately, it just halts progress towards an overall better society. And this is especially prominent within sustainability. And within sustainability, usually what happens is that someone with a neutral view on sustainability hears a misrepresented or distorted kind of myth or truth of sustainability, and then that since they are beginning with being neutral on it, that kind of lie, that false belief about it, eventually causes them to disbelieve in sustainability and be opposed to solutions about sustainability, even though they're oftentimes very beneficial for society and them. And as someone who is an advocate for sustainability and for people who want to be an advocate for sustainability, in today's world, if you really want to properly advocate for it, you really have to be equipped with the proper interpersonal and communication skills that are able to cut through the noise, if you will, of people of an opposing view. So essentially what I mean by this is being able to have proper discussions and productive discussions and conversations with people of an opposing view on sustainability or sustainability issue. And so if you have the proper skills to handle the conversation well, where it's going to be a productive and thoughtful discussion, you can kind of cut through the noise of what they believe and kind of clear the myths and all the false truths about sustainability and sustainability issues. So for this video, I'm trying to break down some of the techniques and skills that you can use within a discussion with someone of an opposing view on how to not really handle them properly, but be able to handle the discussion properly and possibly, just possibly, change their mind, or at the very least, influence what they believe in. So, not exactly that they change their mind, but they have a different but somewhat more informed view of a sustainability topic or just sustainability in general. So, I'm going to break down during the breakdown of some of these discussions, I'm going to kind of have my doppelganger, and he will represent an opposing view in sustainability. So it'll be kind of a back and forth. So you'll see what I mean later in the video. So with an unproductive discussion, oftentimes what it evolves into is that it becomes a shouting match. The two people of an opposing issue start shouting at each other. They're trying to get their points across and they're not really listening. And at the end of it, no one really changes their mind. In fact, sometimes people often feel more strongly about their issue after an unproductive discussion. So to start, first thing you must know is that you may not be right on an issue. So for example, what I mean by this is let's say you're talking about like climate change. Now you may be correct on climate change being anthropogenically caused, but you may not exactly be correct in what is the best way to tackle climate change. And so it's important that you internalize that within, not just within sustainability discussions, but within just discussions in general, where you have someone of an opposing view that you're talking to. You may not always be right on it. And so you need to internalize this. So once you've internalized that you may not be right, that doesn't mean you have to give up or anything, but just once you've internalized that there is a possibility, there's another thing you kind of need to acknowledge, and that is it's okay to adjust your beliefs. Specifically, it's okay to adjust your beliefs in the process of being presented new evidence. And so there's kind of a stigma towards it, so towards changing your mind, and I feel like that's kind of a wrong stigma to have. Now, there's a point of being too gullible and changing your views just like that and too easily. However, if the argument that the other person makes is very strong and it's very convincing to you, don't seek to be further into your argument and seek to be too deep into it and try to argue even more. If you feel like they're the right ones and they've made a correct argument, it's okay to alter or change your beliefs. There's nothing to be ashamed of about that because ultimately you've done what few people can do. And that's something you should be very proud of, being able to change your belief when someone presents you with good arguments and evidence for it to change. And lastly, it's okay to disagree or agree to disagree, as I like to say. Sometimes the discussion is evenly matched, and neither of you come up with evidence or solutions that change the other person's mind, and that's okay. It's okay to agree to disagree as long as you have now a more informed view and perception of that person's argument. Then that's okay. It was still a productive discussion. You don't always have to seek a discussion or conversation to influence or change the other person's mind. It's okay. And you don't, once you realize that you guys are not really changing, just end the discussion right then and there. There's no point in trying to continue on further if you guys have already made up your minds. Now, for the first part, listening. Now, listening in a discussion or conversation, debate, whatever you call it, it's oftentimes the most underutilized and important skill to have because people oftentimes mistake listening from hearing. Now, listening is the active participation of understanding or trying to understand and comprehend what someone is saying to you, making an intentional effort to hear them and see what they are saying. Hearing is just the passive act of letting their words or noises come from one side of your ear and go out the next. So there's a very big difference between listening and hearing. So when you're talking with someone with an opposing view of an issue that you disagree with, it's important to remember to listen to them. That way you can fully understand what they're saying and what they believe in. You don't want to not listen to them. And then when you try to rephrase the argument, misrepresent what they're saying. That's just going to derail everything. So make sure first when having a discussion with someone, listen to them. So the second most important skill to have is to breathe and stay grounded. So oftentimes it is very easy to get upset and angry at someone with an opposing view if the discussion gets very heated. So oftentimes you'll feel your pulse rising, your breath getting more shallow, your eyes narrowing, you just getting more tense, the emotion filling up in your head, and you just need to breathe and stay calm and notice the anger within you and calm it. And like I said, notice these emotions and control them. And note that while you may feel angry, you do not need to act on this. You do not need to act on your emotions. There's a difference between your thoughts and your emotions can influence your thoughts, which can then influence your actions. But if you're able to stop it at the first stop, separating your emotions from your thoughts, you'll be able to completely change how you react. Now, while you may have your emotions settled, once you've noticed them and have stayed cool, calm, and collected, the other person might not, and they may be the ones that get very emotional. And that's where my next point comes in. And so, when dealing with emotional people, it's really important to indicate during the discussion that you're not there for a fight. But first, you must identify if they're starting to get all riled up and starting to get kind of defensive. And so, oftentimes, they'll raise their voice or they'll start speaking faster. And you just need to emphasize that you are not there for a fight. So, when you notice this and you see these kind of effects happening, just make sure you let the person let everything out, let all their not maybe their emotions, but let all of their sentences and points come out. And so once you feel that they are done and they've paused, make sure to pause for a brief second to make sure that you do not interrupt them because sometimes they'll just need a quick breath and they'll start getting back into it. And so if you don't give them a moment to collect themselves and you start speaking, then you'll interrupt them and it'll kind of disrupt the conversation, the discussion, and they might start trying to interrupt you and everything, and it just kind of goes downhill from there. So make sure when you think they are done by letting everything, while they have let everything out, pause for a moment and then start speaking in a slow and calmer voice. I'll demonstrate this. And so if we throw away our fossil fuels, no one's going to have a job, and then we're going to have no power and not going to be able to live. Okay, I understand what you're trying to say. Another point to make with dealing with emotional people on an argument is that you want to ask them very in-depth questions about their arguments in order to fully understand it, to fully gauge what they believe in. And so oftentimes this can be phrased as something like, so it sounds like what you're saying is blah, 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 this. And that's a really good way to make sure that you understand what they're trying to say and what they believe in and the arguments that they're trying to make. So that way you can eventually see what you're kind of up against before you start making your points. And so once you have gotten the full picture of what they're trying to say, I would start by framing your disagreements with what they're saying as questions. And so let me frame this, for example. So, yes, while nuclear energy can help with our fight against climate change, isn't it also like extremely expensive to install as well as also handle the nuclear waste? Another thing you can do is essentially acknowledge what the person has said, sort of with an agreement, but then add a but to it, sort of as the YouTube channel Charisma on Command refers to as yes, but, and then you say your retort or your counter argument. I don't think we should force companies to regulate what they put into the water or what they dump into the water. It's just really expensive. Yes, but regulating water quality will ultimately be very beneficial for everyone because we have cleaner water. Sometimes when having a debate about someone, they may have their emotions in check, but they'll be trying to get you emotional or at the very least seem like they're the ones that are correct, no matter how false their argument is. I like to call these people just bad arguers, but the two-time world debate champion, Bo Seo, has a kind of criteria for four types of people who are bad arguers. You have the liar, the wrangler, the twister, and the dodger. And so while earlier in this video we talked about how to stay calm, I also wanted to talk about with these bad arguers how to effectively deconstruct their argument. So to start with the dodger, their goal is to essentially change the subject of the argument or the point that you're making. In order to effectively stop climate change, we need to transition to renewable energy. And they might respond, so if you're so set on reducing emissions, how come you drive a car to work? This can be kind of off-putting, and if you let it, it can distract you from what's being said. And so it's important to stay the course and kind of bring the topic back into focus rather than engaging in what they just said. But we're not talking about what I drive or what I'm doing personally. We're talking about how we need to transition to renewable energy to halt climate change. With the twister, they may intentionally misrepresent what you're saying. We need to reduce our dependence on cars by making cities more walkable and bikeable. To this, they may respond, so if we reduce our dependence on cars, are we just eventually going to ban them and not use them at all and we'll have no freedom to go anywhere? And this can easily be fixed by saying, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying we need to reduce our dependence on cars, not completely eliminate. So the wrangler is someone that points out your cons or the faults of your argument, but that's all they do. They don't come up with anything else. They don't come up with their own opinions or beliefs on what else to do. And so, for example, I think we should consume less material goods, and that way we can reduce the amount of natural resources we need to keep our economy afloat. Okay, but if we reduce or consume less material goods, then the economy is going to slow down, people are going to run out of jobs, and it's ultimately just going to be worse for everybody. So in order to counteract the wrangler, ask them what they believe we should do. What's their opinion on the issue? What should be their course of action on how to tackle this issue? Well, since you're always pointing out the cons of my argument, what do you believe we should do? What do you think the course of action we should take to handle this issue? And so lastly, the liar is pretty self-explanatory. And oftentimes they don't lie just once, they'll lie multiple times. And so to be able to counteract them, you need to do what the two-time world debate champion Bo Seo states as plug and replace. Essentially what they're saying, or what he's saying, is plugging the lie that they make by saying it's not true and replacing it with the truth. So it should go something like this. I hear that actually windmills produce more CO2 emissions from manufacturing than coal, and natural gas. So that's not true. While it is true that windmills do produce some CO2 emissions, it's far lower than what natural gas, oil, and coal produce. So it's ultimately still a much cleaner option than the fossil fuel options. So being able to effectively communicate and discuss with people of an opposing view on sustainability can ultimately help to change and influence their minds about it. And you may not always change their mind, but you at least change the way on how they view it. And having enough of these discussions and having enough people have these discussions with people on sustainability can help create an informed public, which can vote and create political action that changes the country or a community or wherever you live for better for the environment. And so ultimately, I want you to become the match that lights the fire within your friend circle, within your family, or within your community, no matter how big or small it is, and start their fire for a greener future.